When Maya Johnson bought an old, derelict radio tower for a fraction of its worth, she expected nothing more than a challenging restoration project. But what she didn't know was that the rusting metal skeleton concealed a forgotten underground complex, and inside, secrets worth millions and a history shrouded in mystery. What she found down there would change her life forever, revealing hidden treasures and a web of intrigue that went far beyond what she could have imagined. Before we dive into Maya's incredible journey, let us know where you're watching from. If you love stories about discovery and adventure, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode will have you on the edge of your seat. Maya Johnson had always found solace in machines. They were predictable, reliable, unlike people. She had spent years in her small, cluttered mechanic shop, patching up old cars and trucks, bringing them back to life with a wrench and a little elbow grease. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, and that meant everything. So, when she saw the online listing for an abandoned radio tower in a remote area of the country, something stirred in her. The price was too good to pass up. It was listed as a fixer-upper, but Maya knew what that meant, a project. And if there was one thing she was good at, it was fixing things. The listing gave no real details except that the tower was located outside of town and had been out of use for nearly 20 years. It wasn't a high-traffic area, and the sellers were desperate to offload it. She didn't waste time. A few calls and an agreement later, she was heading out to see it for herself, her truck loaded with tools, and a sense of excitement that felt almost reckless. The sun was barely rising as she drove through winding country roads, her thoughts on what lay ahead. She imagined the tower, a skeletal structure rising from the earth, weathered by time, a forgotten relic from a bygone era. As she reached the Devon.com property, Maya couldn't help but feel a strange sense of unease. The place was isolated, tucked away in a hollow of the valley, surrounded by thick woods. The radio tower itself was taller than she expected, looming like a giant against the morning sky. It was rusted, but the structure seemed sturdy enough. She parked her truck and stepped out, breathing in the crisp, cool air. The land was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of wind through the trees. The seller, an older man who hadn't even bothered to show her around, handed her the keys and a brief explanation of the tower's history, which was basically non-existent. According to him, it had been used for military communications during the Cold War, then decommissioned and forgotten when it became obsolete. There were no other buyers, no one else interested in the place. Maya had the feeling it wasn't just the tower that was abandoned, it was the entire area. "Good luck," the man said, his voice gravelly. With that, he climbed into his truck and drove off, leaving Maya standing alone in front of the towering metal structure. Maya stood for a moment, letting the weight of her decision settle over her. She had always been one to take chances, to dive into the unknown with nothing but a good gut feeling and a set of tools. This was no different. She walked toward the base of the tower, running her hand along the rusted metal, inspecting it. The structure was solid enough to salvage, but the work would be intense. That much was clear. Yet, the more she thought about it, the more she felt this could be the project she had been waiting for. Something challenging, something big. "I'll make this place work," she muttered to herself, already formulating a plan. "I always do." As she stepped back to her truck to grab her tools, something caught her eye, a small shack nestled behind the tower, half hidden in overgrowth. The door was slightly ajar, almost inviting her in. She frowned. There was something off about the whole place, an unsettling feeling that tugged at her gut. But she didn't come here for comfort, she came here to fix things. With a deep breath, Maya made her way toward the shack. Little did she know, she was about to uncover something far beyond a simple restoration project. Maya's boots crunched against the overgrown grass as she approached the small shack behind the radio tower. It was nothing more than a dilapidated structure, half buried under the weight of years of neglect. Its wooden walls sagged, and the roof was covered in moss. But Maya wasn't here for aesthetics. She was here for what might be hidden inside. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a dark, musty room. The air inside was thick with the smell of old wood and dust. It wasn't much, just a few rusted filing cabinets and old crates piled in the corners. But something about the room made her skin prickle. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. There was no electricity, but the light filtering through the broken windows was enough to illuminate the dusty remnants of what had once been a workspace. Maya approached one of the crates and, with a grunt, lifted the heavy lid. Inside were old cables, twisted and tangled, along with some outdated electronics. Nothing unusual. She moved to the next crate, curiosity pushing her forward. It was locked, but with her trusty crowbar in hand, she popped it open. At first, she didn't believe her eyes. The crate was filled with metal panels and equipment, but there was something else tucked beneath it all, a metal hatch. It was smaller than she expected, but its sleek, almost military-grade design stood out from the rusted clutter. Maya knelt down, carefully inspecting the edges. There was no sign of recent use. No fingerprints. No traces of anyone being here for a long time. Her pulse quickened. This was no ordinary shack, and this was no ordinary find. The hatch was heavy but not too difficult to open. She could feel the cold metal as she gripped the edges and tugged it free, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. The thought of descending into an unknown space sent a thrill of adrenaline through her, but Maya wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. With a deep breath, she dropped her crowbar into her tool bag and descended the steps, her boots making soft thuds as she moved deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, and the smell of stale concrete and mildew filled her nostrils. Her flashlight illuminated the path ahead, casting eerie shadows along the walls. The stairwell seemed endless, and the deeper she went, the more she felt like she was stepping into another world entirely. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage opened into a large underground room. What she saw took her breath away. The walls were lined with old military-style crates, and in the center of the room, under a thick layer of dust, were what looked like massive storage containers. But it wasn't the crates that captured her attention. It was the piles of gold bars. Stacks of them, gleaming in the dull light of her flashlight, sat untouched on the concrete floor. The gold seemed to shimmer, almost alive in the dim space. Maya's eyes widened. The room felt otherworldly, like she had stumbled upon something that had been hidden for decades. The presence of the gold was overwhelming. But there was more strange electronic equipment, blinking lights, and cabinets filled with documents. This wasn't just a storage facility. It was something much, much more. She took a cautious step forward, her heartbeat echoing in her chest. The gold was real. She knew that much. But what the hell was it doing here? And why hadn't anyone found it before her? Maya felt a chill race down her spine as she realized this was no simple discovery. She wasn't just uncovering a piece of history. She had uncovered something far more dangerous, and she had no idea who might be watching. As the reality of her find set in, one thought lingered in her mind. What had she really gotten herself into? Maya stood frozen in the center of the underground room, the beam of her flashlight shaking as it flicked across the gold bars. There was something surreal about the sight, like a treasure, hidden in plain sight for decades, waiting for the right person to stumble upon it. But Maya wasn't here for treasure. She was here to fix things. Fixing wasn't just about nuts and bolts. It was about understanding what had gone wrong and how to make it right. And right now, everything in this underground room felt wrong. She knelt beside one of the crates, brushing dust away with her gloved hands. The metal surface of the crate was cold and unmarked, save for a small, faded label. With a slight tug, she pried open the lid. Inside, instead of the usual old electronics she'd expected, there was more thick, leather-bound folders and rows of blueprints. She glanced at the title of the first folder she pulled out. Signal Command. Special Operations. Her curiosity piqued. Maya sifted through the contents. Most of it was written in neat, official language names, dates, coordinates, and mission details. Some pages were stamped Top Secret, but they were faded, as if the documents had been handled countless times before being stashed away down here. She flipped through, her eyes scanning for something that made sense in the haze of military jargon. Then, she came across something that made her heart skip a beat, a map of the local area. On it, a red circle marked the exact location of the tower, and beyond that, a secondary facility, labeled only as Restricted Site. The plot thickened. This was no ordinary radio tower, and it certainly wasn't just a relic from a bygone era. It was part of something much bigger, something that had been hidden for a reason. The presence of the gold now seemed to make sense. It was not just some forgotten treasure. It was tied to something classified, something worth protecting. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing in the middle of a puzzle that was starting to unravel, piece by piece. She set the map aside, and rifled through the rest of the folders. Most of the documents were classified, detailing military operations, some in code, others with strange symbols and encrypted messages. But it wasn't until she stumbled upon a thick, manila folder, tucked in the back, that she truly understood the magnitude of what she had uncovered. On the front of the folder, in bold red letters, were the words, Project Titan. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a thick binder filled with handwritten notes, schematics, and photographs of what appeared to be cutting-edge technology. The images depicted equipment that didn't belong to any known military operation, geared machines, strange radio equipment, and a series of cables that seemed to lead back to the tower. She stared at the photo of the main component. It looked like a large metal box with blinking lights and a control panel, but there was something more unsettling about it. There was a symbol on the side, a shape she recognized from her research, the U.S. Signal Command logo. Her mind raced. Was this project connected to the tower? Had it been a part of a larger operation? And why had it been abandoned without a trace? A chill ran down her spine as she realized what she was holding. This wasn't just a stack of old documents. This was the key to a massive, hidden operation that had been buried for years. Whoever had left this behind had done so deliberately, intentionally keeping the operation secret, and Maya had found it all by accident. She took a step back, her mind spinning. There were people, organizations, governments that would kill for this information. She knew she couldn't just leave it all here. But how far would she go to uncover the rest of the story? And who was watching? The realization hit her. This was bigger than she'd imagined. Much bigger. And now, she was in the middle of it. Maya stood alone in the dimly lit room, the weight of what she had discovered pressing down on her. She had always been good at fixing things, but now, it wasn't just machines she was trying to repair. It was a web of secrets, and the only way out might be to follow it to the end. Maya couldn't shake the images from the manila folder. Project Titan. The name echoed in her mind as she sat in the dim underground room, surrounded by crates, gold bars, and the weight of the classified documents that seemed to hold the answers to a long-forgotten mystery. She had always known there were hidden histories buried under the surface of the world, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. The more she flipped through the pages of the binder, the more she realized the full extent of what she had stumbled upon. The technology described in the documents wasn't just military grade. It was cutting edge. Years ahead of its time. Maya had worked with machinery her whole life, but nothing in these blueprints resembled anything she'd seen before. The diagrams depicted strange, intricate systems, radio equipment that could transmit over vast distances, a power source that seemed to operate without an external supply, and devices with functions that weren't fully explained. But it wasn't just the technology that held her attention. It was the people behind it. The documents contained mentions of several names: Dr. Forsyth, Evelyn O'Connor, Dr. Nathaniel Fisher, General William Hayes. Each name appeared repeatedly, tied to the development of the equipment and the operations at the facility. Maya was no stranger to military secrecy, but these names weren't familiar. They weren't on any official records. Who were they? And why had they been erased from history? She dug deeper, finding a series of letters written between the two SA project's key players, but they were strangely fragmented, as if someone had intentionally removed parts of them. In one of the letters, Dr. O'Connor spoke about the final test for the project, something that involved an undisclosed location and the need for complete isolation. But the next few pages were torn, leaving her with more questions than answers. The more Maya read, the more it became clear. Project Titan had been abandoned, but not by choice. The final entries in the letters spoke of an impending government shutdown of the entire operation. It seemed there had been an event, something catastrophic, that led to the project's sudden cessation. But what exactly happened? Was it a failure? A scandal? Or something darker? Maya's head swam with possibilities. She flipped through the pages faster, desperate for more clues, until she came across something that made her blood run cold. Tucked between the blueprints was a photograph, yellowed with age. It was blurry, but it clearly showed a group of people standing in front of a large metal structure, the same structure she had seen in the blueprints. It looked like a warehouse, but there was something odd about it. A strange symbol was painted on the side of the building, the same symbol that appeared on the box she had seen earlier. It was subtle, almost hidden beneath the grime and rust, but Maya recognized it now. The symbol was a government insignia, a marking used in classified operations. Maya could feel the weight of the photo in her hands, as if it held some ancient truth about the tower. This wasn't just a forgotten project. It was part of something much larger, something involving not just a secret military operation, but the kind of power and influence that could have been kept hidden for decades. Whoever had worked on Project Titan had been on the cutting edge of something monumental, and the tower? It was a key to everything. The more she thought about it, the more it seemed clear. This wasn't just about gold or military equipment. The people involved in this project were hiding something much more dangerous. And Maya had walked right into it. She'd opened the door to a world she wasn't prepared for. A world where secrets and power were buried beneath the surface, and where the stakes were much higher than she ever imagined. Maya carefully put the folder down and stood up, her mind racing. She had to know more. She couldn't turn back now. But as the walls seemed to close in around her, one thought haunted her. Who else knew about this? The eerie silence in the underground room suddenly felt more oppressive. The shadows seemed to grow darker as she realized the enormity of what she had uncovered. She wasn't just fixing machines anymore. She was unraveling a mystery, one that had been buried for years, hidden by forces far beyond her understanding. And as she turned to leave the room, she could have sworn she heard a faint sound from somewhere deeper in the complex. A door creaking open, footsteps echoing. Someone was here with her. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped back from the piles of documents, the weight of her discovery settling heavily on her shoulders. She had known this would be a big project, something that would push her skills, maybe even challenge her limits, but this was something else entirely. This was more than a mechanical overhaul or a routine restoration. She had uncovered a covert military operation, something far beyond anything she could have imagined. Her mind raced as she walked through the dim corridors of the underground complex. The stillness of the air seemed to press in on her, and every creak of the floor beneath her boots sounded like an alarm. Who else knew about this place? Who else had access? She paused, staring at the piles of gold bars, the faint glint of them reflecting off the low light of her flashlight. It was almost absurd how out of place they seemed. They were physical, tangible evidence of something bigger, something hidden beneath layers of secrecy. Maya had never thought of herself as a treasure hunter. She was a mechanic, a fixer. But this wasn't just about fixing things anymore. It was about uncovering something buried deep within history, and it was going to change everything. But it wasn't just the gold or the documents that were drawing her in. As she picked up the photograph again, she couldn't shake the sense of responsibility that gripped her. The people in the picture, Dr. Evelyn O'Connor, Dr. Nathaniel Fisher, and General William Hayes, they weren't just names. They had worked on this project, put their hearts into it. And whatever happened here, whatever caused it to be shut down, had affected them, too. She needed to know their story. With a deep breath, Maya resolved to dig deeper. She couldn't back away now. Her life had never been about half measures. She wasn't about to turn her back on this, not when the answers were right in front of her. She gathered the documents and made her way back upstairs to the surface, the early evening light falling across the tower like an omen. As she stepped outside, the air was cool, the distant hum of the wind in the trees adding to the eerie silence of the area. Maya walked back to her truck, her mind churning with questions. Why was this place left untouched for so long? And why had it been abandoned so suddenly? She opened the door of her truck and sat behind the wheel, but instead of starting the engine, she stared out at the tower. The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows across the ground. There was something about the way it stood tall and silent watching her. Was it still listening? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Maya had spent her whole life working with her hands, with machines. She knew how to fix things, how to rebuild them from the ground up. But this was different. The stakes were higher, and the path was no longer clear. She wasn't just working on metal and machines anymore. She was working with people's legacies, with secrets buried in the past. She was holding pieces of history in her hands. With a deep sigh, she put the truck in gear and started driving back toward her shop, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her chest. She could feel it now, the pull of the mystery, the drive to uncover the truth. She had always been a problem solver, a fixer of broken things, but this This was about more than just fixing. It was about understanding. Understanding why this place had been abandoned, why these people's work had been erased, and most importantly, why she had found it. As she pulled into the parking lot of her shop, Maya's thoughts turned to the future. This was no longer just a project. It was a calling, one that was demanding her full attention. And as much as it frightened her, she couldn't walk away from it. The underground complex, the gold, the mysterious project, it was all part of something bigger, something she wasn't yet able to comprehend. But she was determined to find out. She sat in the truck for a moment longer, taking a deep breath. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow, I'll start digging into the next layer of this story. Just then, she heard a faint noise behind her. It was the sound of a door creaking open. Her eyes narrowed as she looked into the darkness of the parking lot. Was someone else there? Her grip tightened on the steering wheel, but she forced herself to stay calm. The feeling of being watched was nothing new. In this line of work, she had learned to trust her instincts. She turned off the engine and stepped out of the truck, moving cautiously toward the noise. The shadows around the shop seemed to stretch longer than they should have, the night air suddenly colder. Maya's hand hovered near the tool belt at her waist. She wasn't alone, and whoever was here, they weren't just looking for answers. They were looking for something she had. Maya couldn't shake the sense that she was being watched. As she stood outside her shop, eyes scanning the shadows, the faint noise from earlier lingered in the back of her mind. She wasn't sure what had triggered the feeling, whether it was her imagination or the weight of the secrets she had unearthed, but she couldn't ignore it. Still, she had work to do. The documents, the gold, and the strange technological blueprints all led her to one conclusion: Project Titan had been real, and it was hidden for a reason. Maya needed to dig deeper into what exactly had been going on at the radio tower, and why it was abandoned so suddenly. She grabbed her gear, heading back to the underground complex, determined to understand what she was dealing with. Her mind was already racing with thoughts on how to approach the next steps. This wasn't just about fixing things. It was about uncovering a network of people, projects, and histories buried by time and secrecy. The underground room she had discovered was still as silent and untouched as the day she first set foot in it. Gold bars were stacked neatly in the corner, as though waiting for someone to claim them. But it was the technology that caught her attention today. The complex systems, the wires, the strange machines. It was clear that whatever this operation was, it was designed to last. Maya decided to start with the equipment. She knew her way around machines no matter how sophisticated, and this was a puzzle she was ready to solve. One by one, she began testing the devices, her hands methodical and sure. The deeper she got into the project, the clearer it became. Project Titan wasn't just about communication. It was a gateway to something bigger. And Maya was going to unlock it, one piece at a time. The hum of the machinery was all that filled the air as Maya worked her way through the underground complex. She'd managed to get one of the devices powered on. It was an old transmitter, perhaps military grade, but surprisingly functional. Its dusty switches and outdated buttons made it seem like an ancient relic, yet it hummed to life, as though waiting for her touch. Maya was beginning to understand the enormity of what she had stumbled upon. These weren't just communication tools, they were integral to something much larger. Her fingers hovered over the buttons, debating whether she should try to decode the frequency or leave it untouched, but her curiosity got the better of her. She dialed the dials, adjusting the frequency until a faint static filled the room. It took a few moments before anything clearer came through. Faint voices crackled through the speaker. Maya's heart skipped. She leaned in closer, trying to catch the words. The transmission was fragmented, the voices distorted, but she could make out enough to realize it wasn't just any broadcast. It was a secure communication. Someone, somewhere, had used this device recently. A voice, low and urgent, mentioned the word Titan, the same name that had haunted her every step since she'd found the project files. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't just an abandoned operation. It was still alive. Someone was still watching over this place, and they knew about the project. Maya's hands froze on the controls. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Whoever had once used this machine had left behind more than just equipment. They had left a legacy, a message for someone who was ready to listen. And now, Maya was the one hearing it. Maya's mind was racing as she turned off the transmitter, her hands still trembling from the eerie transmission she'd just intercepted. The words that had come through, fragmented as they were, had shaken her. It was clear now. Project Titan hadn't been abandoned. Someone was still keeping it alive, and they were connected to the tower. Her eyes scanned the room again, the same piles of gold bars, military crates, and secret documents surrounding her. But now, they felt more ominous. She wasn't just fixing broken machinery anymore. She was entangled in something far bigger, and it was clear that whatever had been built here was far from over. Maya turned her attention back to the documents she'd been sorting through. The names of those involved, Dr. Evelyn O'Connor, Dr. Nathaniel Fisher, were still burned in her mind. As she flipped through the remaining pages of the project binder, she noticed a series of photographs buried beneath the blueprints. Most were blurry, faded with age, but one caught her eye. It was a picture of the facility, taken from an aerial view. In the center, there was a large hangar she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't on any of the original maps or documents. This was new. The hangar looked old but intact, tucked away behind the main structure of the tower, as though it had been forgotten or hidden. Maya's curiosity surged again. If the transmitter had been used recently, this hangar could hold even more answers, or more questions. She grabbed her flashlight and headed back outside, the night air cooler now, the tower standing silent and foreboding against the dark sky. She knew the next step, finding that hidden hangar, was going to be dangerous. But there was no turning back now. She wasn't just restoring something broken. She was uncovering a legacy, one that would rewrite everything she thought she knew about the tower. And it was waiting for her to discover it. The hangar wasn't easy to find. It was tucked behind thick brush and hidden from the main tower, almost as if someone had gone to great lengths to keep it out of sight. Maya's heart raced as she cut through the overgrowth with a machete, the weight of the flashlight in her hand feeling heavier with each step. She had to know what was inside. The photograph had shown her the hangar, but it wasn't just its hidden location that intrigued her. It was the presence of what she, Haver, suspected was another part of the Titan project. If it was connected, if there was something more waiting for her in there, it could change everything. When she finally reached the door, she was surprised to find it unlocked, as if it had been waiting for her. She pulled it open, the rusted hinges creaking in protest, and stepped inside. The air smelled stale, but not damp. It was oddly dry, like it had been sealed for years but preserved at the same time. The hangar was large and cavernous, the faint glow from her flashlight bouncing off the metal walls. It was packed with old, discarded equipment tools, broken machinery, and metal scraps scattered across the floor. But in the back, a large metallic structure stood covered in a dusty tarp. Her breath caught in her throat as she approached it. With shaking hands, she pulled the tarp away, revealing what lay underneath. It wasn't just a machine, it was a vehicle. Its sleek, almost futuristic design was unlike anything Maya had ever seen, clearly military, but something else entirely. She didn't know it yet, but this was the key to unlocking the full extent of Project Titan. Maya stood frozen, staring at the sleek metallic vehicle before her. The machine was unlike anything she had seen, with sharp, angular edges and an almost futuristic design. It looked as if it belonged in a science fiction movie far too advanced for its time, at least based on what she had seen in the old military equipment she'd dealt with. The more she examined it, the more questions piled up in her mind. The vehicle was built for speed, that much was clear. But it wasn't just the engineering that intrigued her. It was the purpose. There were compartments that didn't make sense, hidden hatches, and internal wiring that was far too advanced for any standard military project she knew of. This wasn't a transport vehicle. It was a specialized machine. And it was connected to Project Titan. Maya ran her fingers along the side, feeling the cool metal beneath her touch. There was something almost personal about it. The attention to detail, the craftsmanship, the clear care taken in building it. It wasn't just a weapon or a tool. It felt like a project of passion. Her mind raced as she wondered who had designed it. Dr. O'Connor? Dr. Fisher? The name Titan started to make sense. This wasn't just about power or control. This was about innovation, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The first step was simple. Maya needed to get inside and see what made it tick. She found the hatch hidden beneath a panel on the side and pried it open. Inside, the cockpit was surprisingly intact. Everything was well preserved, as though it had been waiting for someone to find it. She climbed into the seat, feeling the weight of the moment. This was her moment, her chance to finally understand the heart of Project Titan. But what she didn't realize was that someone was watching her, and they wouldn't let her uncover the secrets without a fight. Maya sat in the cockpit of the mysterious vehicle, her fingers tracing the smooth control panel. It felt like she was at the helm of something far beyond her skills, yet the intuition she had developed over the years working with machinery told her she wasn't completely out of her depth. The design was alien, but the core principles, gears, levers, wires, were familiar. She could fix this, she could understand it. But before she could dive any deeper, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. She tensed, every muscle in her body locking in place. It was subtle, but it was there, a crunch of gravel underfoot, the faintest echo of someone moving through the brush. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she slowly turned her head, half expecting to see someone from her past, someone she knew. But the figure emerging from the shadows was a stranger, a man, tall and wiry, with an expression that could only be described as cold. He didn't look like the typical government agent, not in the way Maya had imagined. He wore no uniform, just a dark jacket, and an unkempt look that suggested he had been living on the edge of this world for a long time. "Who are you?" Maya demanded, her voice steady despite the tension that gripped her. Her hand moved instinctively toward her tool belt, where she kept her knife and flashlight, anything to defend herself. The man smirked, his eyes narrowing. "The question isn't who I am, it's what you've found." Maya's stomach twisted. He knew exactly what she had uncovered. "But how?" "I've been watching," the man continued, "since the day you stepped into this tower, trying to bring it back to life." He took a slow step forward, studying her as if she were a puzzle he was about to solve. "But what you don't realize is, you've just opened Pandora's box." He stepped into the hangar, closing the distance between them. "You've triggered something that's been dormant for decades. This Project Titan, it's far from over, and you've just become part of it." Maya's mind raced, trying to process the weight of his words. Pandora's box? What had she truly uncovered? Who was this man, and why was he so certain that her discovery was more than a mere accident? "What do you want?" Maya finally managed to ask, her voice still unwavering. The man's smile was small but dangerous. "What I want is to stop what's coming next." Maya's pulse quickened as the man took another step toward her, his eyes cold and calculating. Every inch of her body screamed to run, but she stood her ground, her fingers tightening around the edge of the vehicle's cockpit. The weight of his words, Pandora's box, hung in the air between them like an ominous cloud. He was right. She had uncovered something far beyond the scope of a simple restoration project. But what did it mean? The man didn't seem to care for pleasantries. He stepped forward, glancing around the hangar, taking in the vehicle, the piles of documents, and the gleaming gold bars. "I don't think you fully understand the mess you've stepped into," he said, his voice low, but sharp. "Titan isn't just about cutting-edge tech. It's about control, power, and influence. It was meant to change the world, but the people behind it, they knew it would be dangerous. That's why they buried it here." Maya's mind raced. She had never been in over her head like this before. She wasn't just a mechanic. She was in the middle of something far larger than herself, and she didn't know how to get out. "Who are you?" she asked again, though the answer didn't seem to matter. She already knew. He was one of the people who'd been part of the project, someone who had stayed behind to guard the secrets buried here. The man sighed, almost regretfully. "My name doesn't matter. What matters is that you're the one who found it. And now you're stuck. You think you're the one in control here, but you're not." He took a step back, his gaze hardening. "This is bigger than you, bigger than any of us. And if you keep digging, you won't just be a part of it, you'll be the one it all falls on." Maya felt a knot twist in her stomach. She wasn't afraid of a challenge, but the weight of what she had uncovered now seemed too much for her to carry alone. The man had a point. Titan wasn't just about a forgotten military project. It was about legacy, power, and control, and someone didn't want her to uncover that truth. "I'll take my chances," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, though doubt crept into her words. The man's expression darkened. "That's the problem. You don't know what you're up against." He turned and began to walk toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the hollow hangar. "You'll see soon enough." Maya stood still, the silence overwhelming her as he disappeared into the night. She felt a chill settle in her chest, a sense that the stakes had just escalated. There was no turning back now. She had unleashed something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Maya didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. The man's warning echoed in her mind, rattling her thoughts like loose bolts in an engine. "You're not in control," he had said. "This is bigger than you." But as the hours passed, something shifted in Maya. She wasn't the type to back down. Not from a challenge. Not from something that sparked her curiosity. She was a mechanic, and she'd built a life on fixing what others saw as broken. She wasn't about to let a mysterious stranger tell her how this story would end. The first thing she did the next morning was head back to the hangar. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to find them by hiding. She had the vehicle in front of her, the transmitter, and all the documents. There had to be more to the story. She needed to learn how it all connected, but when she arrived, something felt off. The hangar doors were ajar, and the air inside felt different, stale, as though someone had been here recently. Maya's stomach sank. Her instincts screamed at her to be cautious. She stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. The vehicle was still where she had left it, but the floor was now disturbed. There were boot prints leading toward a back exit, leading into the woods. Her heart raced as she followed the prints, the crunch of her boots against the gravel sounding louder than ever. The woods were dense, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and earth. She moved carefully, her eyes darting from tree to tree, searching for signs of movement. And then, she heard it. A faint rustle in the distance. Maya froze, holding her breath. Someone was out there. She crept closer, her fingers curled around the handle of her flashlight, ready to strike. She couldn't afford to be caught off guard, not now. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by a voice, low and urgent. "You shouldn't have come here, Maya." Maya's blood ran cold. The voice was familiar. It was the man who had warned her. But he wasn't alone anymore. There were others, and they weren't here to talk. Maya felt the weight of the woods pressing in on her. The thick, dense trees were like silent sentinels, their shadows stretching long into the twilight. The voice that had spoken to her sent a chill through her, not just because it was familiar, but because it was laced with something darker, an undercurrent of warning, of violence. The rustling in the brush grew louder, and her instincts kicked in. She needed to move. She wasn't going to wait for the unknown figures to make the first move. Her heart raced as she ducked behind a tree, her breath shallow and quick. She could feel the ground beneath her feet, the rough bark against her back. "Think, Maya," she told herself. "Think." The man's voice had been unmistakable. She had heard it clearly, the same man who had warned her away from the project, the one who claimed to have been watching her. His words played over and over in her mind. "This is bigger than you. You've triggered something." She wasn't sure what exactly she'd set in motion, but she was certain of one thing now. Titan wasn't a dead project. It had been waiting for someone to dig, to uncover, to bring it to life again. And she had done that. Whether by accident or fate, she had cracked open Pandora's box. The figures in the woods were close now, and Maya couldn't afford to be spotted. She glanced around quickly, spotting a large boulder near a thicket of brush. Without a second thought, she sprinted toward it, her boots sinking into the soft earth as she made her way through the underbrush. She couldn't let them catch her. She didn't know who they were, but she knew enough to be certain that they weren't friends. Just as she reached the boulder and crouched low, she saw them, two men, both dressed in dark clothing, their faces obscured by the shadows. They were carrying something, a large metal case between them, and they moved with precision, like soldiers on a mission. One of them looked around, his gaze sweeping over the area just yards from where Maya was hiding. He paused, his hand resting on the handle of his weapon. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had no way of knowing if they were armed, or what they wanted, but one thing was clear. They weren't here for a friendly chat. Maya forced herself to stay as still as possible. Her breath came slowly now, measured, trying to make herself disappear into the shadows. She knew if they spotted her, there was no going back. But the weight of what she had uncovered was more pressing. She needed to know what was in the case. What were they carrying? What had Titan been really about? The two men moved past her, too focused on their task to notice her crouching behind the boulder. They reached the trees on the far side of the clearing, and she heard them begin to speak in low tones. She couldn't make out the words, but she didn't need to. She knew now that her discovery had put her in the middle of something far larger than she ever anticipated. Maya stood slowly, her mind racing. The trail was clear now. Those men were carrying something. A piece of the puzzle. But how much further would she need to go to uncover the whole truth? And what would happen if she couldn't stop them from finishing what they started? With a deep breath, Maya began to move again, staying low and moving quickly toward the clearing. She was no longer just trying to fix a broken machine. She was in a race, and she needed to get ahead of the men who had already seen the stakes. The past she had unearthed wasn't just a relic. It was something that had to be stopped, or it would swallow her whole. Maya's mind was a blur as she moved through the underbrush, her every step silent, calculated. The men had gone, their footsteps fading into the distance, but she knew she couldn't rest yet. She had learned enough to understand that this was no longer just about uncovering secrets. This was a race against time. She had to find out what they were up to, and more importantly, stop it before it was too late. As she made her way back to the hangar, the same vehicle she had uncovered earlier loomed in the distance, its sleek, unfamiliar form almost haunting in the fading light. She didn't have time to focus on it now. The new puzzle, the one that was threatening to consume her entire life, was too important. The men had been carrying something, and Maya needed to understand what it was, what it meant. When she reached the hangar, she paused to survey the area, scanning for any signs of movement. The silence around her felt deafening, the kind of quiet that suggested something had changed. She entered the hangar cautiously, her eyes darting to every corner of the room. The vehicle was still in place, untouched, as though nothing had happened since her last visit. But now, Maya's eyes fell on the large metal crate sitting beside it, the one the men had carried out. It was covered in layers of dust, but the markings on the side were unmistakable. This wasn't just any crate. It was the kind of military-grade container that spoke of power, control, and secrecy. Maya moved closer, her breath quickening as she examined the lock. It was high-tech, not something she could open with a crowbar. This was a task that would take more than brute force. She needed to think. She took a step back, trying to steady herself. The history she had uncovered was vast, and now, with every new piece of information, the puzzle grew more complex. Project Titan wasn't just a failed experiment. It was part of something far bigger, something with implications that stretched well beyond the tower. This crate held the key, and Maya wasn't about to let it remain a mystery. She searched the hangar for anything that could help. It wasn't long before she found a metal box tucked behind a stack of crates. It looked like a maintenance kit, but as she pried it open, her fingers froze. Inside, there was a set of digital keys, a combination of numbers and letters she didn't recognize at first. But as she studied them, something clicked in her mind. She grabbed the keys and rushed back to the crate, heart pounding in her chest. She inserted the code, and with a soft click, the crate's lock released. Maya took a deep breath as the lid slowly lifted, revealing what lay inside. At first, she couldn't believe it. The crate was filled with intricate machinery, advanced systems that looked like they belonged to a high-tech laboratory, not a remote radio tower. It was clear now. This wasn't just military equipment. It was part of an operation that had been designed to change the course of history. This was the core of Project Titan. But as she lifted one of the devices, something caught her eye, a small, hidden compartment inside the crate. She reached in and pulled out a bundle of papers. It was a journal, its cover worn and old, but the words inside were clear. The entries were detailed, explaining the purpose of the machines, the experiments that had been conducted, and the ultimate goal of the project. The final entry sent a shiver down Maya's spine. It spoke of a plan that would change everything, an artificial intelligence designed to control global communication networks. It had been hidden away for decades, dormant and waiting. And now, Maya had found it. As she looked at the journal, her mind began to race. She wasn't just a mechanic anymore. She wasn't just uncovering a lost project. She had found the heart of something much bigger. And whoever had been watching her, whoever had tried to stop her, this was far from over. Maya stood frozen, the journal in her hands, its pages heavy with the weight of the truth. The pieces of Project Titan had fallen into place, and the magnitude of what she had uncovered seemed to crash down on her all at once. The military-grade equipment, the AI designed to control global communication networks, the gold, none of it had been an accident. It had all been part of a master plan, hidden for decades, And now, it was in her hands. But as she stood there, her mind raced. What next? She couldn't just walk away from this. What she had found wasn't just history, it was a blueprint for the future. The kind of future where one entity could control everything. It was dangerous, and it needed to be stopped. But she wasn't sure how. She had come here to fix things, to restore the forgotten, to bring life back to what had been discarded. But this wasn't something she could fix with her hands. This was about choices. This was about responsibility. She thought about the man in the woods, the ones who had warned her. They weren't the only ones who would come looking for what she had uncovered. She was on borrowed time, and she needed to act fast. The journal's final entry still burned in her mind. The AI system, the one that could control every network, every communication system in the world. The project had been built with the idea that it could change everything, rewrite the rules of power. But it had been abandoned, buried deep beneath the earth, locked away from those who would misuse it. But now, the door had been opened. Maya felt her resolve solidify. She couldn't let this go on. She couldn't be the one to hand over the power that could destroy everything. With a deep breath, she closed the journal and placed it carefully inside her bag. She glanced once more at the vehicle, the hangar, the crates full of secrets. The weight of it all was suffocating. But Maya was no stranger to heavy burdens. She had spent years in the shadows, working in her small shop, fixing broken things. Now, she had to decide whether she would let this broken world continue, or whether she would become the catalyst for change. As she walked toward the exit of the hangar, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps crunching against the gravel. This time, she didn't flinch. The moment had come. The man from the woods appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He said nothing, just stood there, watching her. Maya felt the tension in the air, the years of secrecy, the years of planning, all building to this moment. "I've found what you've been hiding," she said, her voice steady, "but I'm not going to let it fall into the wrong hands." He didn't move, his gaze never leaving her. "You think you can stop it? You think you're the only one who can control this?" Maya's eyes hardened. "No. But I can make sure it doesn't control me. Or anyone else." There was a long pause, as the man seemed to weigh her words. Then, he took a slow step back, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I guess we'll see, won't we?" Maya didn't wait for him to say anything else. She walked past him, her mind already racing with plans. The journey ahead would be difficult, but she had come too far to turn back. She knew the risks, she knew the dangers, but the world couldn't afford to let Project Titan see the light of day. Not now. Not ever. And as she stepped into the night, the weight of the journal in her bag, Maya knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just fixing machines anymore. She was fixing the future.